No one is at fault. No one is ever at fault. We are all merely products of factors and circumstances outside of our control. Now, I'm not saying that it's all nurture. In fact, it's probably 50-50 between nurture and nature. But, just as our initial environment is outside of our control, so too are the nature of us as living creatures. The brain we are born with, its initial values, we do not control those factors. No one does. No one actually has free will. It's all an illusion. We are all merely products of everything else, none of which are actually under our control. Let's talk about that, shall we? Years ago, I heard that people don't actually have free will. Of course, I didn't take it seriously at the time, and I immediately dismissed it. I mean, it was just such a ridiculous idea that I couldn't be bothered to even think about it a little bit more deeply. Then, a while later, completely unrelated to that event, I began thinking about how we are all basically just an endlessly complex series of electrical signals existing within a biological structure, a biological computer, a simulation, a biological simulation. In that scenario, other than different hardware, are we really any different from computers? If not, then can we say that if a computer becomes advanced enough, then it can potentially possess free will? Quotation marks. The answer to this question is tightly tied with the question and ethics of simulations. If we are all living in a simulation, then is it meaningless? Are our lives meaningless? A disheartening thought, I am sure, that we are all merely inputs in a computer. But what if the fundamentals of that problem are already reflected in what we are able to know, grasp, and ascertain of our own nature? What if we are all merely inputs in a machine, a biological machine, but a machine nonetheless? It processes complex data using some sort of system, in our case, electrical, same as with our own computers. The neurons act as the wiring and infrastructure, and for an added bit of uniqueness, we make use of chemicals as well, which even that could be argued to not be our mode of thinking. Rather, our thoughts exist purely within electrical neurons. Those chemicals are merely affecting or altering the arrangement of said neurons and the electricity running between them, much in the same way as any stimuli would alter our neurons and electrical signals. Like, say for example, what we see, that's data transmitted to our brains using our eyes. Or perhaps here, same thing, same case, data transmitted to our brains which alter the electrical signals and neurons within it. Based on the information that we have so far, I am forced to conclude that we are all nothing more than mere biological simulations. But to go back to philosophy, does that make us meaningless? Is mere the correct term to use? If so, then is everything else meaningless? I mean, obviously there is no objective meaning, sure. But what about subjective meaning? If we were able to create an AI just as complex and emotional as us, then is that AI worthless, meaningless, just like its creators, us, humans, biological simulations? We ask, how do we know if an AI is merely a simulation or if it is truly conscious? But what we fail to do is to turn that question back onto ourselves. Are we truly conscious? Or is our consciousness merely simulated? And perhaps is everything an illusion? Everything that we perceive, everything that we see, everything that we are. I would argue that certainly all that we perceive is an illusion, a secondary representation of whatever it is that exists around us. To that, some might say, aha, then there is an air of truth still to what we perceive, what we see, what we are. Is there not? Well, yes, you could certainly say that. But then the same goes for any external stimuli perceived by computers. It's merely reacting to the world around it, creating an imperfect model of reality, and change those values a bit, and that supposed reality perceived by the robot is going to be very different from ours. In which case, we cannot claim the reality that they are seeing to be untrue, because it is only as true and as false as our own reality. Because we, as well as any other AI that we can come up with, is only creating a representation of reality. We are not seeing reality itself. We are all living in our own simulations, in our own minds. We are AI with many initial inputs. We have different devices or organs with which to perceive and interpret the world. The visible light spectrum, the wavelength of vibrations, the chemicals of matter, the textures present in solid, liquid, gas. All that information is processed and filtered through our brain, which had a lot of initial values to begin with, and is further shaped and changed as it interacts and reacts to the world around it. Those initial values could range from perceiving colors somewhat differently than others, to being unable to feel certain emotions typical of humans, to perhaps feeling and being more sensitive to certain impulses. Someone could possibly lack empathy, a sociopath. Perhaps someone has an overflowing amount of empathy, an empath. Still, regardless, people become as they are not by choice but by circumstance. Not once in those processes did we have a choice, and to even become a being capable of choosing, there would first be some sort of initial values placed, even if not by nature. If you give it all to nurture, then did you ever get to choose that nurture? Did you ever get to choose your circumstances? What nation you are born in, the family you are born with, the body you are born with, the psyche, the mind you are born with. If then, in turn, it is by nature that your self is decided, then did you get to choose that nature? No, you didn't. You didn't get to choose what brain or what mind or what psyche you are born with. You didn't get to choose the chemicals that enter your body, at least initially. And then from then on, all your decisions are influenced and shaped by all your past experiences and what you have in your mind, in your brain, which you didn't get to choose either. Without any initial values, then you can't really become a being capable of thought. Therefore, we did not come about by choice. Choice itself is an illusion brought forth by an advanced algorithm that we happened to have, that we happened to be, but never chose. We are just not aware of it ourselves, how our mind is working behind the scenes, the processes that it undergoes with every passing minute, second, millisecond, we don't see how similar we truly are to computers, and how we are all basically just very advanced computers, biological simulations.